Folks, if you're thinking about interviewing anytime soon, now is the time to start preparing. Interviewing is not about smarts. It's not about personality. It's all about preparation in the modern age as more and more companies use more and more tools to separate the wheat from the chaff. Our interviewing series is over 50 podcasts that go through in detail every step of the interview, how to prepare, how to dress, resumes, cover letters, how to chit-chat, how to answer, tell me about yourself and your leadership style and significant accomplishments with repeated examples, how to close, how to ask questions, how to follow up, everything in enormous detail, because we know interviewing for most people is a black box. Come and check it out. Welcome to Career Tools, our guidance on bad career advice, changing the dates on your resume. Here we go. So, Wendy, we surprisingly have seen a lot of differing advice about how to write the dates in your resume, as if there were multiple ways to consider doing so.
Yeah, it's like saying, how many ways can you write your birthday?
The majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, writing the dates in your resume in a different way is basically about deceiving the hiring manager. And of course, the primary question is, why would you want to start a relationship like that? And of course, the answer to that is because I think I can get away with it to hide an error, a weakness, a flaw, whatever. But we've got some more reasons as well, and we need to put this to bed because you and I both suffer a little bit from academic creep here. The idea that if we were teaching freshman English in college, we would be getting slightly smarter every year, but the freshmen stay about the same level of knowledge. And so you begin to think that the freshmen coming in each year are dumber and dumber. No offense, folks. And we live with resumes every week. We see them all the time. And we learn more and more. And yet most people are doing their resume for the first time. And they're following guidance from their Uncle Bob or a friend whose mom used to be in HR or something like that. So what's our guidance?
So we're going to talk about including both the month and the year, not hiding gaps, and going all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, and I assume when you talk about month and year, that's for the reverse chronological part of one's professional experience. But there should also be dates around college graduation, correct? Is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a big one that people leave off. And I get it all the time, and I immediately have a little bit of okay. I hate to say it, but the guy's old, and he's made an error by suggesting that I'm going to hire him or not hire him based on his age. And now he, again, as you said earlier, willing to deceive me in order to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the issue. The issue isn't that somebody is old or young or anything else we can establish from the dates. The issue is they're trying to hide something or they're trying to deceive you. And anyone who tries to deceive you has an automatic black mark with, and a lot of people believe that to be that they're fighting back against something. They're fighting back against ageism. And so they're putting that on you, an assumption that you will be ageist, which, of course, people react to in a way of saying, well, of course I'm not.
Yes. Yeah. And the idea is, in some cases, the recruiters won't notice that you've had a lot of jobs in a small amount of time, or that there are gaps on your resume. Clearly, in the world, I've always felt that resumes follow a little bit of Horstman's Christmas rule. And Horstman's Christmas rule, folks, for those of you who don't know what it is, most of you, if you celebrate the Christmas holiday, you look forward to it, you enjoy it, and yet when it's done, you're stressed out and pretty tired. And that's because A, it's important to you, and B, you do it rarely. Those two things, rareness and importance together, mean you're typically bad at it, even though you may, in fact, get some joy out of it. The same is true with resumes. Frankly, to some degree, the same is true of interviewing. And people come to their resume, and they didn't learn the last time, and they don't have a career management document that keeps it up to date. And so I'm sure, Wendy, that part of the reason this persists, if you'll pardon the expression, the relative dumbness of each person who comes to write their resume at the time they do it. And secondly, there's evidence somehow that it works. They hear a story, and that makes it easy for them to justify doing something. If they don't know what the standards are, then any story that makes a behavior within the resume, changing something in some way, successful in terms of getting an interview, getting a job, they'll say, well, okay, clearly there aren't standards, or it's a cognitive bias that mistake feeds my belief that I can kind of do what I want, and it's about me getting what I want.
Yeah. Every time somebody says, oh, I didn't put the months on my resume and I got the job, you add that to your bank of reasons why I'm right. And every time you see one that says, I didn't put the months on my resume and I didn't get any interviews, and when I did, I got interviews, you put in your bank of things that don't apply to me for whatever reason. They're in a different country, they're in a different industry, it's a different job, because your bias is to find things that agree with your decision. That's a human thing. It's not a fault of anybody. It's just a human thing, and we have to kind of guard against it when we're looking at things like this.
I called it cognitive bias. That was dumb. It's confirmation biases. We've talked about that all the time. We tend to reject that new information unless it has significant supporting material around it, or a trusted friend delivering it to us, or data we can believe. We tend to ignore things which don't confirm what we already believe. And if you have a doubt because someone's told you, oh, you can't get hired if you're over 50, and then someone says, well, you can leave the years and months off your resume, well, why wouldn't you do it? I think what's important there, I mentioned data. There's no reason for people to assume some sort of causality between leaving dates off and having something good happen, right?
So yeah, those things are not necessary. They may be related, but they're not necessarily cause and effect.
And they're certainly not important, because if you leave months off of a resume, months or years off of a resume, there must be a ton of other stuff on the resume, and you don't have any data that if you'd put your months and years on the resume, you wouldn't have gotten the interview.
Yeah, and I've never seen anybody test that. I have seen people test names, although I still think that's unlikely to give a good result, because I believe that recruiters who see a resume will recognize it the next time they see it, even if some things have changed. Oh gosh,
yeah. I think if you mean you're talking about like doing 2 resumes, change the name and so on.
Yeah.
Oh, if you send them in a stack of 100, there's not a recruiter I know, there's not a person who goes home on the train with stacks of resumes who can't say, this is the same guy. They would know it immediately. You change the gender of the name, doesn't matter. They're going to say, wow, basically the same person. Oh,
yeah,
the same person.
But that's weird. He's got exactly the same experience as the guy or the person I looked at earlier.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to something we both alluded to but didn't say categorically. Let's get inside the mind of that recruiter. What does the recruiter or hiring manager think when they see a resume without months?
That something is being hidden. We talked, Danny and I talked about this in the recent cast about spouses and telling your spouse what you're doing. If there is a lack of information, then there's mystery. And we always fill the mystery with the worst case scenario. That's human beings. And so the moment that there isn't months on the resume, I think, what were they doing that they're trying to hide from me? Or what lack of experience do they have that they're trying to hide from me? Or what gap do they have?
What weakness do they have in their application to me that they're trying to hide? Exactly. And of course, and I assume if you're like me, and you and I have done this enough that I suspect we are, that you think, well, I'm looking harder now.
Yeah, absolutely. You better be really good, because like already you've tried to pull the wool over my eyes.
Yeah, not good. And what you're saying with months is you're saying if I were to put on my resume 2012 to 2013, and I meant that as January 2012 to December 2013, in other words, 2 full years, but it could also mean December 2012 to January 2013, meaning 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, right?
Mm-hmm. From 2 years to 2 days can be true with those dates. And because There's a really big difference between a candidate that's had 2 years experience and one that's had 2 days experience, no matter what they were doing. And you can understand why hiring managers are really annoyed when they think you've had 2 years experience and you come in and you say, oh, actually, it was just a couple of days and the time around that was unemployment. It's not that so much that that's a bad thing in and of itself. It's that the recruiter or the hiring manager makes an assumption based on the dates, and you then don't live up to that, or they take the time to interview you, and yet it's based on a false interpretation by the hiring manager, which you have led them to.
Right.
You may still have got an interview with 2 days experience, because it's not, if that experience wasn't important in the job, then it wouldn't matter that you only had 2 days.
Right.
But if it is, the main part of the job, then you need to have had 2 years, and you need to say that. Let's say you're an accountant. You cannot go into the job with 2 days experience and be any good at it. 2 years, yes. But if you make it seem as if you've got 2 years experience, not only is it a bad thing for the interview, but it's also a bad thing if you get the job, because you really aren't going to be any good at it.
Yeah. You give the most egregious example of 2012 to 2013 with the implication it's 2 full years rather than just bizarrely 2 days. And it's technically true. Well, I did have her from 2012 to 2013. And that reminds me of one of the subtle differences. What we like to say about our resumes is that your resume must be persuasively truthful. And the noun there, or the basic subject of that, is truthfulness. And then within reason, you need to be persuasive. Okay. What that would be, 2012 to 2013, knowingly attempting to obscure, is truthfully persuasive, meaning your purpose is to persuade, and you're going to be truthful, only it's really designed to be persuasive. And you'll be able to say, well, that's actually technically true. And if you ever have to say it's technically true, then essentially you're saying, I was trying to mislead you. Another way to think about this is it's not as egregious as the December 2012 to January 2013, the 1 month or 1 week or 2 days versus the 2 years, is if I have 2 jobs and I put 2011 to 2012 and 2012 to 2013, I might very well have 6, 8 months, 9 months of a gap. And people think, well, I can have gaps and I can just use the years and I can hide those 2 or 3 gaps that I had. Some people want to do that because they got fired and they didn't want to look for a job, or, they just weren't motivated, or they're difficult to work with, and they were fired with prejudice or whatever. Some people, on the other hand, had family issues, had setbacks in their careers, they had health issues, they had personal tragedies, whatever, and they think, well, that's going to look bad. They're going to assume I lost my job and couldn't find another one. But our guidance is don't hide your gaps, right?
Right. I think what's happened is people have heard that having gaps on your resume is bad, and they've kind of interpreted that to mean, therefore, you shouldn't show any.
Right.
It's not that the gap is in and of itself a problem. It's the gap without explanation that's a problem. So I have no problem in calling people for interviews who have big gaps, like 18 months or 2 years or whatever.
Don't care.
Yeah, but I am going to ask about it, and I expect a reasonable explanation.
Yeah. Hey, look, my mom was sick for 6 months. Okay, fine. To me, I don't care. If the rest is good, guys, I'm telling you, recruiters are okay with gaps. The gap problem on resumes has been created by people attempting to mislead managers, and then the manager wants to dig to find out. But if the rest of the stuff is okay, you could probably be okay. And the reason why is because this is, in my opinion, Wendy, this is a vocabulary issue, because people say gap to mean unexplained gap, and we think of gap as, not that rare, and can be completely understandable and not worried about it. We got to touch it. We got to talk about it, but no big deal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are lots of reasons that you just said. There's lots of reasons that people have gaps. If it's straight after college, it's often because the college graduate was looking for their first graduate job. And they may have had part-time jobs that they haven't put on their resume, but it's common to have a large gap after college.
Yeah, gosh, if you're listening to us in 2015, folks, the last couple of years have been pretty hard on college graduates.
Mm-hmm.
To graduate in June of 2012 or May of 2012 and then not get a job until October of 2013, we understand. Yeah, there are kids who went to your school who were top of the class and they didn't struggle. They got a job. Okay, fine. You're not one of them. We can tell that. We're going to find that out in the interview. I just wouldn't worry about it at all. So the idea that, well, you have to hide that, like graduating in 2012 and starting in 2013, is silly. And you get caught doing that, and you will, you're done, right? I mean,
yeah, it starts to show a pattern of deception, and nobody wants an employee who deceives them.
Right.
Like, that's obvious. So other gaps. So any gap between 20 and 40 is usually due to child rearing, elder care, or illness. So if somebody says, yes, I've got a gap, and it's due to one of those things, that's completely reasonable and not unexpected at all.
Right.
After 30, it's often because people have enough money to take a sabbatical, take a few months off before they start looking for a job. And again, that's perfectly, it's fine to say, do you know what? I've been working for 25 years and I wanted 6 months off.
Yeah.
There's no problem with that.
I'm frugal. I'm saving for my retirement. I could do it. I cut my expenses to the bone. I spent 6 months, gave my wife a chance to finish her MBA, and I stayed home with the kids and connected with them. They were 7 and 9. At some point, we knew I'd have to go back to work, and it lasted about 6 months, and the kids and I still talk about it. I'm telling you, I got to like this guy.
Yeah.
I got to say, that was a non-standard decision. And he had to answer a bunch of people. Hey, what are you doing now? What's the new job? No, I'm not working. Yeah. Gutsy call.
That's interesting. And the last one is downturns. In downturns, jobs take longer to get. That's just, everybody knows that. And so if you have a gap because it took a long time for you to get a job, that in and of itself is not a bad thing. As long as you were trying. If you were sitting on the sofa eating bonbons, I don't have a lot of sympathy. But as you know, if you could say to me, well, I was unemployed for a while, I was searching for a job in the mornings, I made this many applications, and in the afternoons, because I was unemployed, I could take some time to, go to the gym or go to museums or learn something new. I'm like, okay, you use that time wisely. And good on you, right? But hiring managers are attuned to what's going on around them. So if you're a mathematician and you came from a certain company that's just gone under, I would know that. I would know what happened to that company. I would know what the market for mathematicians was like and how long roughly everybody is unemployed. Or you come from a certain, if you came from Detroit, and there had been the kind of issues that Detroit has had for the last 10 years, I would expect to see more gaps on people's resumes. So again, it's the unexplained gap that's the issue, not the gap in and of itself. So you don't need to hide the gap. You just need to prepare to be asked, what were you doing?
Yeah, I could just see pre and post interview, 2 recruiters sitting around talking about an interview schedule for a series of candidates. And Mark and Wendy are sitting there, and Wendy says to Mark, hey, I'm interviewing Bob Smith at 2:00. And I would say immediately, oh yeah, Bob Smith, you saw the gap, right? And Wendy says, yeah, I'll ask about it. And then the interview happens, and we get together afterwards, and I said, well, who are your top 3? And she says, I got Terry, I got Ann, and I got Bob. I said, oh, Bob, what was the gap? Oh, it was this. Oh, okay. That's it, guys. Yeah, we got to ask, but that's it. Now, I just want to interrupt here, Wendy, because we haven't said yet, okay, what do I do? So what do we want them to put on the resumes? I mean, we're talking month and year, right? But how do we recommend they write it? Is there only one way?
There isn't only one way. I think including the month and date that's essential.
Yes.
The way I would recommend is to write the month as 2 numbers and the year as 2 numbers divided by a /. So 01/12 because that's the shortest number of digits
Right.
or the shortest number of spaces you can take on your resume, and reducing things that are admin gives you more space for the
More
things
space
that are
for
important.
for meat, for sinew, for the value. You know,
Exactly.
it's interesting you say that. I kind of thought you were going to say a 3-month, 3-letter month abbreviation, which is what I would do. But you're right now that I think about it, and it's also easy in that it goes across language barriers as well, because March is always the third month, but I don't know how every language abbreviates the third month of the year. So,
Yeah, and if you've got plenty of space, there's no problem with writing out
yeah,
March.
when you're a
12.
recent college graduate, you could put March 2012, yeah, or March space single quotation mark indicating a contraction 1-2. And can I just say that, folks, we understand in the military resumes have more gaps on them than the civilian resumes. It's a function of how long you were traveling. A move was included. You then went to some training that was short and doesn't really justify being on the resume. It took me some time to be assigned to a new role, or even in the situation that's fairly rare. It's less rare than it used to be, where I'm sorry I can't talk about what I was doing then. That's okay. It's reasonable. Now, look, if you're in prison, if you were in the brig, if you got court-martialed, you have to say that, but we understand that. And don't worry. The whole point of this is I believe this is a negative, my gap, my issue, a gap, or anything else related to time and showing time on your resume. And so therefore, I'm going to be abstract in describing it. And it's built on a false understanding that we are by definition going to have a problem with that. And we're not. So be persuasively truthful, which is to say, when it comes to dates, month and year.
I used to love interviewing people who had gaps they couldn't talk about from the military. There was always so much fun as you listen to them kind of make palatable what they were going to say. They would say, well, I was working for, let's say, a government agency. And you just knew this is going to be fun.
Yes. I had a good friend who, when he got out of the CIA, he said, can you help me with my resume? I said, yes. And we put it all together, and he said, this is technically true. I said, well, the issue is whether or not it's technically true, and it is respectful of the secrecy you have to maintain, but also doesn't go any further than that. You're not taking license with the secrecy rules. And he said, what am I going to do in an interview? I said, well, you're going to have to continue to be vague. He says, you think they'll still hire me? I said, I wouldn't be helping you if I didn't think they'd still hire you. Your resume won't matter. Okay. Now, our final point here is something we see a lot. People say, oh, I only need to put the last 10 years worth of timeline on my resume if I'm 40 or 45 years old. But our recommendation is to go all the way back to the beginning.
I can't believe how stupid this is and how many people keep recommending it. Because there's two really good ways that you're going to annoy the hiring manager or the recruiter. So let's imagine you're 50 and you decide to only put 10 years on your resume. But that's okay. But does your resume go back to an entry-level job? Of course it doesn't. So I know immediately that you weren't a senior accountant the moment that you left college, and therefore there's stuff missing on your resume. And then my next question is, why?
Yeah.
And I fill in the gap.
Why? It's not what did you do, it's why. In other words, why are you leaving that out? Your interest in being persuasive over my interest in knowing the truth.
And people do that, and then they don't get interviewed, and they assume it's because of ageism. And it's not. It's because you effectively lied.
Yeah. And then people say, well, I didn't lie. I says, no, you effectively lied. And since we're the ones with the power, we're going to decide how that works. And you can be frustrated by it, but this is the system. And as we've said many times before, the resume system, the interviewing system, is a bit like Winston Churchill's quote about democracy. It's the second worst form of government in the world, and all the others are tied for last. So you can complain about it. Maybe you'll be the person that will make it better. But for now, with your resume, you need to go along.
Yeah. And the other thing is, let's say you passed the phone screen and the phone screener wasn't very good and decided that 10 years of experience was enough. So the hiring manager is then expecting a 30-year-old, right? College plus 10 years of experience is around 30 usually, maybe 35.
Right.
And in comes a 50-year-old. Do you think they won't notice?
Yeah. Well, I am told I look young for my age.
Not that young. I just don't understand how people can think that the hiring manager won't notice and won't have an opinion about that.
So our guidance is just list everything, right?
Just list everything, yeah. And there are hiring managers and recruiters who will discriminate based on age. There are, because we can't legislate against stupidity. We can do our best, but we can't. And assuming that hiring managers are going to discriminate is just to taint everybody with a brush that's not true.
Right.
If you think you're a perfectly reasonable person, a nice human being, and you don't discriminate, you have friends who are everything from 20 to 70, then the hiring manager is probably like you and probably, is not bothered by people's age. They want to fill the job with the best person possible. And age has nothing to do with that.
Yep. And take it from two people who have interviewed tens of thousands of people. It doesn't. It's just generally not an issue. We just don't care.
And you can tell when people come into interviews and they're expecting to be discriminated against.
Yep.
They just have some aura. They don't have the energy and excitement that people do.
I'll tell you why. Because they're devoting part of their cognitive approach to the interview based on the fear of discrimination around age. You can't do well in an interview against somebody who doesn't have that fear, whether they're 50 or 30, if they're not devoting part of their brain power to the worry about discrimination. They're giving full attention to describing their background in the most persuasively truthful way. And you end up fighting the interview fight with one hand tied behind your back. And it's your fault because of a belief that probably isn't true, but feeds a common misperception about how hiring is done. You just want to have the ability to both focus on the questions and show the energy or excitement that's required to get the job, regardless of age. And you say, well, I wasn't energetic or excited enough. And they say, well, that's just a dog whistle. That's just a phrase that says you're old. No, it has nothing to do with that. You thought we were discriminating against you, and you were constantly looking for the hidden hook that could get rid of you. And you'll discover at the end of the interview, there wasn't one. You wasted a lot of energy in the wrong place.
Should I sum up?
Yeah, please.
So we said include the month and year. Don't hide the gaps, but be prepared to talk about what you were doing and go all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And it occurs to me that if you were sitting around watching Netflix and eating bonbons in a previous gap, you can always say, look, I was younger then, I was more stupid, and I regret that I did that. That would still be a good explanation for a gap.
Yep. Good. Okay. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Don't do it. If somebody tells you to do it, don't change the dates in your resume. See you next week.
Career Tools produces actionable guidance for professionals every week. To receive additional materials via our newsletter and to find products for situations you may face, go to www.managertools.com. Search for Career Tools on Twitter and LinkedIn.